I'd like to call the meeting to order. I want to thank all of you for attending today. Our first item of business today is the election results. The nominations and elections chair, Candy English. Candy, where are you?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. As the N&E Nominations and Elections Committee Chair, I would like to go ahead and present our past election results. The report on the quorum, there were 12,672 members eligible to vote. 1,267 votes were necessary to obtain a quorum. A total of 3,248 votes returned, representing 25.6% of the eligible membership. 2,840 votes were done electronically, which is 93.6% of the votes, and 193 votes were cast as paper ballots, 6.4%. The election results are as follows. Steve Reynolds received 2,196 votes, which is 23.9%. Lanny Smith received 1,665 votes, 18.2%. April Hassan Hillard received 1,479 votes, 16.1%. Beth Dingman received 1,443 votes, 15.7%. Jody Walker received 1,228 votes, 13.4%. And Dale Howard received 1,161 votes, 12.7%. Thanks, everybody, for running for the board, and thank you to all members participating in the voting, and we're looking forward to another great election season coming up next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Candy. I want to take a few minutes to thank the outgoing directors, Nancy Austin. There she is. Beth Dingman, Jim Carden, and Joe Magliola. I really appreciate your service to GVR as a board member. It's been a joy to work with you. They laugh. Welcome. I want to welcome the new and incoming board of directors, April Hilliard. You're up front. Where are you, April? There she is. Steve Reynolds, Lanny Smith. We've been trying to talk Lanny into joining for 2 years. He finally decided to pull the trigger. So I do look forward to serving on the board with our new members. It's been an exciting year, and I'm sure Scott's got a list of things that he's going to tell you. All the things we did in our 27 meetings. So we do meet, we do spend a lot of time, and we don't get paid. So there. And I want to thank the volunteers who have served on each of the board committees. Our audit committee chair is Nancy Austin. We had Peggy Adelman, we had Bert Olson, Gail Vanderhoof. In Board Affairs Committee, chair was Bart Hillier, with Beth Dingman, April Hassan Hilliard, Ed Knopp, Joe Magliola, Pat Reynolds, Lanny Smith, Jody Walker, and Gail Vanderhoof. Fiscal Affairs, the chair started out with Carol Carruthers, and then when she had to leave for health reasons, Nellie Johnson took it over for us. Kathy Batchelor, Dale Howard, Bob Quast, Pat Reynolds, Steve Reynolds, Lanny Smith, Priscilla Spurgeon. The Investment Committee chair was Nellie Johnson. Michael I'm not good at this. Calado? Is that how you say that? Dale Howard, Bev Lawless, George Losenben, and Eric Solwell. Nominations and elections, the committee started out with Barbara Blake as our chair, and due to health reasons, she stepped aside, and Candy graciously and wonderfully stepped in to chair that committee. Betsy Walton, Barbara Stewart, and April Hilliard. Planning and Evaluation Committee, the chair was Jim Carden. Dave Barker, Candy English, April Hassan Hilliard, Ed Knob, Bob Quast, Stuart Tagg, Betsy Walton, and Diane West. And I encourage you, are they still open? Are the apps still open? Okay, the apps are still open until April 4th, so step up, join a committee, please. They have so much fun, right? Yes. Yes. I want to put out a really big thank you to Scott Summers, our CEO. His leadership has been wonderful. See, he thought I was going to say something bad. It only took me a year to get used to it, but now he's got me trained. So he's done a great job, and he has an absolutely fantastic staff. So we do appreciate the staff. They back up the board, they help the board, they prepare our minutes for our meetings and all our papers and keep us all on track. And when we get lost, they send us emails, and if they have to, they send somebody to your house. No, just kidding, they don't do that. So again, a thank you to Scott and his staff, and to David, who rolls his eyes every time I come in his office. David is our CFO, and his standard answer when I ask him something is, I'll get back to you. I need to check with Scott. Yeah. Right? Okay. So I want to thank the members who have attended meetings in person or on Zoom and who send in questions to the hotline and to the board email. I try to answer board emails. If I haven't answered you, please send it again. It just means it got lost in the multitude of emails I get, I guess. So thank you all, and thank you for coming today. We have the 2024 audit report, RNA CPAs. I think Carly and Ralph, are you here? Okay, I'm going to turn the meeting over to them.
All right. Give that to you. Thank you so much for welcoming us to the meeting. We, as you heard, did the audit for the December 31, 2024 financial statements. We're with RNA CPAs. I am Carly Meza. I am the partner in charge. So ultimately, I'm the one who is responsible for signing your opinion on the financial statements. And then we've got Ralph here, who is responsible for supervising the work, overseeing field work, working with the staff on all of the testing that we perform, drafting the financial statements. So the bottom line, as I've said before, he does all the hard work. He's the brains and the muscles. We're going to go through today. There are some required communications that our professional standards have in place that I'll go through at the conclusion of an audit that we do every year. We're going to go through our audit report and opinion on the financial statements. We'll talk to you a little bit about the key audit areas that we, during our risk assessment process, identified as the riskier areas that required most of our attention. Ralph's going to walk you through some financial statement highlights. We'll talk about management letter comments, any upcoming standards that might be affecting the organization in the future. Ralph's also going to walk you through some industry updates, and then we'll have concluding remarks and answer any questions you may have. All right, now for the super boring stuff. So as part of our required communications, we're required to let you guys know whether the qualitative aspects of accounting practices, whether there were any changes. So for this year, there were no new accounting standards adopted. The application of existing accounting policies did not change. So that means if you're looking at your financial statements, if you look at this year compared to last year, the accounting policies and procedures that were in place did not substantially change. So you've got consistent and comparable financials, which is always the goal. We noted no transactions during the period that there was a lack of authoritative guidance. So what that means is sometimes there may be a transaction that's abnormal that the accounting guidance isn't specific to, and so we may need to do some more research. We may need to stake a position. There weren't any transactions like that this year. Happily, we report that there were no difficulties encountered in the audit. So this might be, failure of the staff to cooperate, which definitely did not happen. Or, if there's an inability to get documentation or an inability to get a confirmation from a third party, and we didn't have any difficulties like that this year. And then walking through our corrected and uncorrected misstatements, we did have 6 audit adjustments and 5 reclassifying journal entries. The reclassifications are things like moving the current portion of the debt to a current account and things that are required to be presented in your financials a certain way, but aren't necessarily misstated on your chart of accounts. So they're really just moving things around to get them presented in the financials the way we need them. The audit adjustments were related to things like recording leasing transactions. So that's something we're going to be posting every year. And then there were a couple of small adjustments related to items that were capitalized that we felt could be expensed, or that were expensed and we felt were more appropriately capitalized. And then we had one adjustment to the prepaid expense balances. But none of the adjustments that we posted were material individually or on a cumulative basis to the financial statements overall. And then there were no past adjustments. A past adjustment would be if we identified a misstatement, but for some reason, maybe management didn't feel we needed to post the adjustment, and if it's not material, then we could waive posting that adjustment. We didn't have any of those this year either. Again, no disagreements with management. To our knowledge, there were no consultations with other independent accountants. So this might be like a doctor's second opinion if there was something that management didn't agree with us on and they wanted to talk to somebody else and say, is Ralph crazy? He is. But as far as we're aware, that didn't happen. And then there were no other matters that rose to the level of communication to the board. Our audit report included an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, so hooray. That means that there were no material modifications to the financial statements that would be required to make them conform to accounting standards generally accepted in the United States of America, and that is a mouthful. Going through, so I mentioned earlier that we, as part of our audit, go through a risk assessment process because we want our limited, we have limited time and resources, and so we want to focus on the highest areas of risk where there could be a misstatement, or maybe it's more subjective or susceptible to fraud. And so these are the areas that we focused on in our audit, not that we disregarded any, but these are the areas that we put more of our time and resources to. So we focused on program revenues and receivables, investments, property and equipment, and there was a fair amount of activity in property and equipment this year. Program expenses, accounts payable and other liabilities, payroll and related liabilities, deferred revenue, net assets, and the designation of those assets. So the board will set aside net assets for future projects or reserves. And so we looked at those, and we also spent a fair amount of time in cash. Now, Ralph is going to walk you through some financial statement highlights and talk you through sort of the results of the operations.
Thank you, Carly. So what we're going to do here is go through a series of slides and just talk about some of the major trends in the financial statements and make sure that there are no questions with regard to results of operations for 2024. So as you can see here, the overall 3-year trends, assets, liabilities decreased year over year. Revenue was comparable year over year, and expenses were up slightly. And let's talk about this in a little more detail now. So with regard to cash, you'll notice on the balance sheet comparatively increased about $349,000. And the increase was due to positive cash flow from operations, which we're going to get into a little bit later in another slide. There's an overall decrease in investments of about $1.6 million. That decrease resulted from the heavy investments in property and equipment with the completion of the Canoa Hills Fitness Center, Desert Hills Fitness Center, and the Del Sol Clubhouse during the calendar year. So property and equipment experienced an increase of about $2.3 million from all the investments and the work being done. and the investment accounts helped fund that while offsetting about 1.1 million of investment income, including realized gains and losses and investment performance for the year. Receivables were decreased about 56,000. Overall, it was comparable year over year. And liabilities decreased by about 1.3 million, mostly from deferred revenue. So it's our understanding that members typically like to pay their dues early in December. Because of some changes management made with regard to payment options, a lot of those revenues were deferred and came in the month of January. So that's more of a timing issue than it is a concern. So in January, those monies came in, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the statement of cash flows to make sure that there's no questions there. Increase in net assets overall for the period of 1.1 million. That was good. Revenues, again, as I mentioned, were comparable at 11.2 million, and expenses year over year increased about 290,000. That's only about a 2.6% increase. So that's right in line with inflation. So that was actually very good overall. Let's take revenue and break it down a little bit now. So the major areas of our revenue are member dues, capital and initial fees, investment income, member, tenant, and guest fees, and program revenue. Those are the major lines where most of the revenue is captured that GVR generates. If we look at it in detail, member dues increased about 82,000, about 22 new members in 2024, and annual dues increased slightly to $515, generating that increase. There's a decrease in new member capital and initial fees. So again, this one's driven by the home sales and turnover in the Green Valley community. So there were fewer homes in 2024 sold, 803 versus 939 during 2023. So we had a 136 home decrease. That decrease was partially offset by the fact that the member capital fee actually increased $100 each to $3,000 in 2024. So there's a partial offset there. Investment income decreased about $100,000, but overall it was comparable year over year. Increase in member, tenant, and guest fees of about $7,000. Again, that's just comparable year over year. Now, program income had a nice increase of about $260,000. Coming out of the pandemic, I think we commented last year that there was more member engagement and attendance, and that trend continued into 2024 with some adjustments to program fees to make the events cover their costs and make sure that they were profitable for both GVR and the membership in terms of rededicating those resources to member activities. So that kind of covers some of the major trends in the revenue accounts. Let's talk about expenses now. Now, globally, if we look at the general administrative operating costs and the program costs, the bulk of GVR's spending is in the program area to make sure that members are benefiting from what's going on. And there's an interesting trend here. If you notice in the percentage of expenditures that are for general administrative, there's a trend in a downward fashion over the last 3 years, from 23% to 22% to 21%. Now, most nonprofit organizations that are in that general range are considered well-run because G&A costs should stay within that range. But if you notice, management has been tightening it up even more with an overall trend of decreasing 1% per year. So again, well done on the part of management there. Let's look at major expenses now. If you look at the statement of functional expenses, a lot of the major expenditures are in these categories between salaries, employee-related like retirement benefits, payroll taxes, health insurance, facility maintenance, overall property insurance, repairs and maintenance, supplies, utilities, and recreational contracts for all the programs that get done. Salaries and wages were up, primarily due to the retention of maintenance employees in lieu of using the outside company. Now, last year, there was a switch where maintenance personnel were relieved and an outside maintenance company was used to help maintain some of the properties. Obviously, that wasn't working. So in 2024, it was brought back in-house to keep the properties at the standards that GVR expects for the properties for the members' benefit. So that's what caused the shift back up in salaries and wages, along with the retention of some pool maintenance workers for the first time, because that's been outsourced for a number of years, and also includes raises over 2023. Decrease in employee-related expenses. So you might say, well, if salaries went up, why did employee-related expenses go back down? And it was from a number of employees who no longer required health insurance and some other costs. Therefore, that drove employee-related expenses down as opposed to up. There was a decrease in facility maintenance of about 86,000, primarily related to a $110,000 decrease from canceling the maintenance contract from the outside company, as well as a little bit of other general maintenance costs offsetting it to a net decrease of 86,000. Insurance overall was comparable year over year, a slight increase from premium increases that insurance companies are handing out across the country. Decrease in repairs and maintenance of about 45,000. A lot of the work that was done in 2024 was capitalized, so there was a slight decrease there. A decrease in supplies of about $71,000. That resulted from less consumption. If we remember last year, there was a lot of consumption in hardware in 23. So in 24, it decreased again and kind of returned to some previous levels of expenditure. Increase in utilities. Overall utilities came up about 2%. It's probably in line with what most utility companies are handing out for rate increases. Increase in recreational contracts of 148K. Again, we mentioned earlier in that slide that members have been more engaged in programs and activities. So obviously we need more entertainers and individuals to help provide those services for the benefit of the members. Now on the statement of cash flows, you might look at the comparable statement year over year and notice that cash flows provided by operating activities decreased about 1.4 million. And so obviously the eyebrow goes up and says, well, why is that? And again, typically in December, when the dues invoices go out, the organization collects a pretty significant portion of those dues by December 31st, its fiscal year end. Well, based on some changes with regard to credit card transaction fees and other things, a lot of the members chose to mail checks. So we know what happens with snail mail. They all came in January. So as a result, that's more of a timing difference, but not something that should be alarming to anyone. Cash invested by investing activities increased. And so the investments kind of funded the investments from 2.3 million into property and equipment, whereas in the previous year, the use of cash in investing activities was because some of it was taken from operations. So that's a good thing that the funds were used out of the appropriately designated accounts to cover the investments in 2024. And then, of course, cash by financing activities is comparable year over year. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Carly to go over some highlights in the footnotes of the statements.
I'm just going to talk through briefly some of the changes so that if you were taking this year's financial statements and comparing them to last year, I'm going to focus on what changed or what was enhanced. And so in the notes to the financial statements, note A, new accounting pronouncement. I just wanted to clarify because earlier I said you didn't adopt any new accounting pronouncements. But if you look in the financial statements in note A, there is still a discussion of a new accounting pronouncement. That is related to the current estimated credit losses standard that was adopted in 2023. So that was not adopted in 2024. But because we're using financial statements, we're presenting both 2024 and 2023 for comparative sake, we had to maintain that new accounting pronouncement disclosure from the prior year. So again, nothing new for 2024 there. In note C, investment in marketable securities. Last year, we had in that note, there are about 3 different ways that we summarize the investment balances. One is by type of investment, one is by board designation for those investments, and then there used to be last year where we classify it in the fair value hierarchy based on what level it is. And there used to be some investments that were a level 2 investment, and I'm not going to bore you with the details of that, but there is a description of what the fair value hierarchy is. And really what it is it's GAAP's way of saying this is a really recognizable investment that has a stated fair value that's published for everybody to know. And that's the best way to value this investment. And that would be a level 1 investment. And there may be some other investments that are a little bit harder. You may have to look at similar investments to use to create the value, and those would be level 2. And so the lower the level that they fall in the fair value hierarchy, the less public and reliable the pricing sources. So you guys used to have in 2022 some investments that technically fell in level 2 for that, how we fair value and say how much this investment's worth. Now you don't have that anymore. All of your investments are level 1, so we felt like we should take that summary out and just disclose that all of your investments are level 1, because there was a lot of information in that note before. Then going to note E, the operating leases, operating and finance leases, there was just a little bit of an addition with the relationship for the Del Sol Clubhouse, for the vendor that does the little coffee shop. So we added that disclosure in there. On note G, the refundable membership change fee liability. With the audit committee's recommendation, we worked with them and changed the naming of that. I think we used to call it the property acquisition capital fee or something like that. And it was inconsistent throughout the financial statements, so they recommended that we change the naming convention there, and I think that was a good enhancement. And then they also raised a really good disclosure that I think is very useful related to the Arizona House Bill 2119 that limits when you can charge fees on transactions, and included an estimate of what the impact on the organization might be there. So that's also added to that note. Then looking at note L, the future major repairs and replacements. This note, we worked with David pretty closely to enhance this and make this a little bit more user-friendly. I think we tried to clarify from the reserve study what components were included and which ones were excluded, because the reserve study doesn't cover pools and a couple of small components. And so we tried to break that out to make it more clear what's included in the reserve study and the related reserve balance. And then for those pools that are not included, that management uses an estimate and what the reserve balance is related to those. So those are the significant changes to the financial statement notes. So each year when we're going through our audit, we'll have normal course recommendations, questions, and we'll identify operating policies and procedures that may need to be enhanced. And luckily, we've had the benefit of working with your staff for a couple of years, so we've raised those as they've come. Anything that we identify in our audit that rises to the level of a significant deficiency or material weakness is required to be communicated to you. So I'm just gonna, for everybody, because I know you guys don't know our lingo, you don't speak it every day. A significant deficiency would be a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies that would be considered important enough to merit us notifying you that we've identified this. It's less severe than a material weakness. And a material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies together that creates a reasonable possibility that material misstatements in the organization's financial statements would not be prevented or detected on a timely basis. That was a lot to say. We didn't have any this year, so that's wonderful. That just shows that management's been listening to us and adopting any recommendations that we have, and we were super pleased. Not a lot of audits get out without having an issued management letter, so congratulations to the staff there. All right, we're going to get the smooth talker back to talk about industry updates.
Thank you, Carly. And that is true. I think in my experience, and I've been at this nearly 30 years, probably on average, less than 20% of all audits go out without a management letter. So again, congratulations. So industry updates. So every year we like to include just some things that may be relevant. And the last couple of years, we've included some things that might be helpful. And, one of the things that I oftentimes will key in on this is the one element of revenue for Green Valley Recreation that is not necessarily controllable by management, and that is the membership change fee. So let's talk for a few minutes about what's going on in the real estate world and how that might be helpful in terms of planning for 2025. So I talked to a number of industry experts, particularly in the Green Valley area, as well as bankers and my own research and reading when I have nothing better to do at 10 o'clock at night. And so one of the things that I've pulled up is some industry info on homeowners associations. Now, Green Valley is not a homeowners association, but homeowners association is a comparable line industry-wise that, because of what's going on in the real estate world and development, it can kind of give us a parallel guide. And you see this a lot in business analysis where people will use adjunct industries to predict what's going on in a different industry. So homeowners associations have had fairly flat growth over the last few years because of a couple bad years. But in 2024, they were almost at 1% growth. Now, this does not include inflation, so we're talking about real member number increases. Over the next 5 years, their revenue is projected to rise at a growth rate of about, again, nearly 2%. That does not include inflation, so if you factor in inflation, it's really more like 5% revenue growth. So despite this decline in the industry, in the homeownership rate, because that's been predicted for a little while, the industry is going to experience expanding membership from rising disposable incomes. So granted, the pandemic has done what it's done. Inflation has taken its toll. But as inflation is starting to subside, which we'll see in a slide in a few minutes, people's just incomes are not being as pressurized as they were about 12 to 18 months ago. So investors in Arizona properties for renting, and there's a number of them. I've seen them all over Arizona. I'm originally from the East Coast, so I've been here about 5 years. And there's a number of areas in the southern Arizona where investors are buying properties, and they're doing it in these developments with associations that are being put together. Because with that structure and oversight of having a homeowners association, or back east you see a lot of condo associations and others, there's a certain amount of oversight, regulations, rules that have to be complied with. So tenants and others have a layer of regulation there, and the property manager takes over above that for everything else that's significant and major. So one of the drivers for these communities industry-wide is the rising demand for offerings such as social clubs, holiday celebrations, recreational activities, things that GVR is naturally doing already, but community-wide. So the point here is that there's a preference and trend in this area. The industry is turning around and starting to go back into growth mode. And because GVR is offering these things on a community-wide basis, it makes it an attractive location for whether it's investors or developers because of the demand that's coming. Another interesting point that you may or may not know is that counties and municipalities are mandating more responsibility to residential developers, whether it's Horton, whether it's KB Homes, whoever it may be, because they're finding that they're alleviating some of their responsibility and burden by actually having homeowners associations assembled. And essentially when development happens and they build these associations in large developments for homes, again, by privatizing some of these services that the government sometimes may have to get involved in, it's proving to be a beneficial thing. So the trend is for these types of associations to be built nationally as well as here locally. Industry research shows that senior living communities will continue to be a key element in industry revenue. Housing starts were down in December and through the end of 24. And the last bullet point, with 3 rate cuts between September and December, the Federal Reserve is clearly looking to cut rates. The CPI came back in, the second to the last bullet point, with lower than normal expectations, signaling that inflation's kind of slowly getting to where it's supposed to be. It was annualized 3% in January and 2.8% in February. So if it keeps coming in lower at 2.5%, as long as we get under the 2.5 mark, there's a good chance that the Fed will start to think about slicing another quarter point off as the year goes on. And you'll see where this kind of ties in here in the next slide. But to the point here is, as developers think about these things, Green Valley is an attractive area. I know that Canoa Ranch, my understanding, there's about 1,500 homes slated to go in there. There's a slight issue going on they're trying to resolve with a water issue, but there's 1,500 homes coming to Green Valley in that development. Real estate stats indicate that median sale price of homes in Green Valley decreased about 2% from February 24 to 25. Housing inventory has gone up about 37% with homes listed in February compared to February of last year. So that's a significant jump. Now, days on the market have risen from 72 days about a year ago in February to 90 days. So you're seeing a little bit more inventory, a little bit more time to market and convert to a sale, but not a huge drop in pricing, given that the inventory is coming up. So what's happened is buyers have been kind of sitting on the sidelines because they were concerned about the rate volatility. Now that rates are starting to shift, and it usually takes 3 to 6 months for rates to have a full effect. So we won't see the real impact of the rate cuts in the last quarter till probably May, maybe June. But buyers, according to the Arizona Association of Realtors, they're expecting a lot more activity to resume in 25 again, which will mean if there are buyers and there's inventory, transactions will start happening again. So GVR may start to see an uptick or turnaround in that 3-year decline in the member transfer fees. So in that way, it will be a positive thing in the coming year, because I know that's one of the major line items in revenue that are not necessarily easily controlled like some of the other lines are. So just some things to think about with regard to the real estate market and what's going on here in Green Valley that may prove helpful for the board and others to consider when they're looking at budgets and operations for the 2025 year. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Carly to get into just some wrap-up remarks.
All right. We always want to end with, what's to come, and Ralph handled what they think is to come in the industry. But we always want to be ahead and warning you of any significant accounting standard changes that might impact how you report transactions, how you present the financial statements. It's been probably the last 5 years has been one of the most, in my career, one of the most active, I would say, from the standard setters. And so we've been constantly talking people through what's coming, what's changing, what do we have to do to get your financial statements up to date. And luckily, when we went and reviewed the upcoming standards, we don't see anything big that's going to impact you guys next year. There are always little updates here and there, clarifications. There are some upcoming clarifications on income taxes or cleaning up the new lease standard. And I say new because it's within the past couple of years and it still feels new to us. But there's nothing significant that we're going to have to work with the staff on that we see coming your way. So that's good news. And just to wrap up, we want to say a very big thank you to the staff. We get pretty invasive. We do a lot of prying. We have lots of expectations and request lists. And I know that David and his staff probably don't look forward to our visit. But they are super cooperative. They're always able to find us what we need, and they're very responsive. And I wish some of our other clients would take some lessons from them. But we are super appreciative for their cooperation. We're super appreciative of the audit committee. We got some really great feedback. It's nice to know that all the hard work we put into the financial statements is actually looked at by somebody. And so we just want to thank you guys and appreciate the opportunity working with you.
Okay, thank you, Ralph and Carly. That was a great presentation. I'm David Webster. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here. And yeah, we had a good audit this year. It went real well. It's a team effort. This is our third year together, and we've got a good working relationship. But I want to take 1 second and recognize that there are a lot of people on the ground floor that are making the audit go well, and that are taking care of our books throughout the year. And if it's okay, I'd like to just recognize them. That's all right. First of all, I've got our controller, Howie Murray. Will you stand, Howie? Stay standing. And we have Maura Butler. She has been with the company for 18 years. Thank you, Maura. And then also I want to recognize Chris Zubicki in membership, because have stand up. And so these are the folks that really get it done, okay? I wish I could take all the credit, but I appreciate you all very much. Thank you.
And now for the short people. So none of you went to sleep while they were doing their audit. I was thinking we were going to have them do dancing bears next time. So watch for the dancing bears. But we had a good audit. You can thank the staff. You can kind of thank the board for the oversight, I think. But mostly it's the staff. And to have no management letter is unbelievable. I was looking forward to reading it. So, and he calls and he asks me all these questions. And as president of the board, I have to tell him that I didn't steal any money, and I didn't see Scott steal any money, and David didn't get a new car this year. So, you know, I think they're very thorough, they're very accurate, and they're on top of what they're doing. And so I want to thank you for a job well done. And I want to thank David and his staff for no management letter. So thank you. There is going to be a meeting after this meeting. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. We're going to elect our officers, and I think we have other business. A little bit of other business. So you're welcome to stay if you'd like. And now, though no one knows him, especially in a suit, I'd like to introduce to you our CEO, Scott Summers.
So again, thank you all for being here. I want to thank our staff as well. The members, I want to thank our board. I want to thank the outgoing board. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. I'm looking forward to working with the incoming board. We've got a great year ahead of us. So this is a year in review. For the most part, we're also going to be looking ahead into 25. I always like to start these things off with reminding everyone what our lighthouse is, what our guiding light is, what our why is. Why do we exist as a corporation? Why do we get up in the morning? Those kinds of things. And it is our mission statement, which is in the upper left of this slide, which is providing excellent facilities and services that create opportunities for recreation, social activities, and leisure education to enhance the quality of our members' lives. That's why we do what we do. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about how that happens. So the 24 is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I've got a 2024 snapshot of GVR, 2024 accomplishments, and then looking ahead into the rest of this year for goals and projects for 2025. So the snapshot for GVR 2024, this is a little bit GVR by the numbers. It can get a little dry, but I felt it was really important because so many of us only attend or go to one class or two classes or a club, or they'll go to their community center in their neighborhood, and they don't get to see the entire scope and scale of GVR. And so this is an opportunity annually to kind of let everyone know really what's going on. The size and scale is pretty amazing sometimes. So let's dive into that. So we really are kind of like a small city. We have 13,872 households, 22,335 members. That really is a small city. This is always fun. We like to show where most of our members, which decade they were born. 1940 is the most popular decade, followed by the 50s, followed by the 60s. Our most popular birth year is 1947. That's increasing, by the way. All right, so guest passes. We issued 1,535 guest passes this year. This was an increase of 95 guest passes over 23. We issued 1,181 tenant passes, which was a decrease of 69. And I want to say that again. We saw an increase of 95 in guest passes and a decrease in tenant passes of 69. And I wonder if there's a relationship there. We had 87 Life Care members. Some of you don't know what a Life Care member is, but these are members that previously were on a deed-restricted property. They were on title. They've sold their property. They've since moved into an assisted living facility in the area, and they haven't wanted to give up their membership. I can't blame them. I would want to continue my membership at GVR too. So the requirement is that they can continue their GVR membership as long as they pay their dues, but they cannot vote in elections, they cannot serve on a committee, and they cannot run for the board. But they can still participate in all the activities, facilities, club activities, courses, etc. So it's a nice opportunity we like to offer for previous deed-restricted properties and members. Centers, let's get into a little bit more on the size and scope of it, but we've got 7 major centers. West Center, Las Campanas, Canoa Hills are all major centers. Satellites would be Madeira Vista, Continental Vistas, Del Sol Clubhouse. These are all satellite centers. This number is astonishing to me. We own and maintain 176,283 square feet of facilities. This is just one of them. That's a lot, 176,000 square feet. We maintain 57 acres. We have 26 pools and spas that hold an estimated 1.2 million gallons, not dollars, gallons of water, significant. We have 6 fitness centers. Now this is amazing. Each one of the, not each one, but combined in the aggregate, those fitness centers hold 230 large pieces of equipment. We specified large because a dumbbell is a piece of equipment. That's not how we counted it. It's just large pieces of equipment, but that's 230. It's a lot. Our board, this year we had 13 board directors that served on our board. We had 28 members that served on our board committees. The board participated in approximately 31 hours of board meetings in '24, and our committee members participated in about 53 hours for the year. So as President Garneau said, you don't get paid for this, but you sometimes get treats. We had 80 full-time staff in '24 and 24 part-time staff. Now, our facilities department is responsible for maintaining our facilities, cleaning, maintaining, et cetera. This is just, again, a snapshot of the size and scope, but in '24, we completed over 4,200 work orders just to maintain our facilities. That's a lot. Your staff is very busy. Our events program has really taken off in '24. We had a total audience participation this year of 6,700 people, which is phenomenal. That's an increase of 35% over '23. Our total events were 65. That's an increase of 97%. So we're seeing more events. We're seeing a lot more participation, which is great because that supports our mission. Volunteers, we definitely need volunteers to help us pull off all of those events. We saw an increase of 26% in '24, which brought our volunteer total to 116, which is fantastic. We increased some of our events. We're doing tours, paint and sips, wine and designs, trivia, karaoke, different types of holiday events, etc. Let's talk a little bit about clubs. We had 57 clubs in '24, and believe it or not, we have over 10,000 people that participate and are members of those clubs. That's significant. Our most popular clubs, some of these are surprising, some of them are not. Pickleball, the most popular club with over 1,200 members, followed by the computer club with just under 800 members. The photography club, 650 members. The Amigas, 638 members. Woodworkers, 571. This is all followed by clay studio, tennis club, hiking club, meditation, and lapidary. We have 15 sports clubs. That's an increase this year of 323 members. And I should say that's 2,900 people are part of sports clubs. Arts and crafts, we had 12 arts and crafts clubs, which about 2,300 people participated in those. That's an increase of 407 people this year. People are getting a lot more active. It's really exciting. I think it took a while to get past the pandemic, and people are coming back, and they're excited, and they're getting involved. 5 special interest clubs, 9 social clubs, 13 card and game clubs, and 3 dance clubs. We're not only like a small city, but we're actually like a small community college, which is kind of surprising too. But we offer a lot of courses. We offer so many that we offered 821 in '24. That is a small community college, it really is. That's an increase of 222 courses over 2023. Enrollees, we had 7,800 people or enrollees in our courses this year. That's an increase of 798. Again, people are becoming more active. 183 of those courses were actually full. We don't like them to be full to some degree. We want all of you to be able to participate, but it's actually a good sign when they're full. It means we're all out getting educated. Let's talk a little bit about fitness. We had 10 personal trainers this year, which is twice as many as last. Last year, our equipment, when it went down, was down an average of 30 days, which was not acceptable. We've turned that around to a downtime of 3 to 4 days. That's a huge increase, or decrease, but an increase of what we want to do. Fitness offerings. These are different types of classes. We offered 11 fitness type offerings this year. That's 9 more than in '23. Uh-oh, what happened? There we go. Let's talk a little bit about our accomplishments in 2024. This is going to dovetail a little bit on what Ralph was talking about with our auditor. We did see a decrease in revenue, and that was because we saw a decrease in our housing sales. That decrease in revenue impacted our operations budget. It has certainly impacted our capital budgets. The good news is for '24, we were able to tighten our budget, and really, as we talked about, there's only so many things we can control. We can't control the revenue quite the way we can the expenditures. So we were able to tighten our belt quite a bit as we were getting through '24. And even though we did have a deficit towards the end of the year with our revenues versus expenditures, we were able to mitigate that quite a bit and make sure that it wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. So that's a good step. We were able to develop a balanced budget for 2025 despite these decreases in revenue. You mentioned the cost of actually providing the services that we do. On a percentage basis, we're decreasing that, which is fantastic. Because again, we still have a mission that we have to accomplish, and that's why that was on the first slide. But good news to the board and the staff, and thank you for your help. We were able to develop that balanced budget for '25. So, some fun things. The long-awaited Del Sol Clubhouse renovation was completed in '24. This at once upon a time was called the Canoa Hills Golf Clubhouse. Now it's the Del Sol Clubhouse. It's taken really 4+ years to get to where we're at today. But the good news is we were able to finally complete those renovations. And even better news is we were able to secure a vendor so that we now have food and beverage services at the cafe for our members and some non-members, but they are paying a nominal fee for that. The cafe is called 1989 Bakehouse. They're really successful. The food is great. The coffee's fantastic. If you haven't been, I definitely encourage you to do so. We completed the Canoa Hills Center improvements. That was a major overhaul of a center that set the standard for what our centers are going to look like going forward. So as we update and remodel our buildings, that's really the direction that we're looking to go. We expanded the capacity of the auditorium at the Desert Hills Center. We finished a walking track at the Canoa Hills Center. Our members have been talking about something like this for quite some time. We have beautiful weather here, but in the summer it's a little hot. It's kind of hard to get out and walk. They really like the air conditioning, and I 100% get it. We created a new user-friendly website. This was launched last spring. A lot less clicks to get to where you want to go. It's more intuitive, it's more attractive, it's easier to navigate. We made significant headway on the lapidary, the artisan shop, the wood shop, and the metal shop expansions. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into the 25 goals. But these were big lifts, and I'd like to thank the board for, your leadership on moving these projects forward. We updated finance and capital policy improvements, capital improvement policies. This was a big lift for our Fiscal Affairs Committee. They developed these recommendations, which they forwarded to our Board of Directors. And after several drafts, our board actually adopted some updates, and this was a significant accomplishment. We also included in our 2025 annual budget 3-year forecasting. This was something we hadn't done previously. So we're really paying attention to what's happening years out now, which makes a lot more sense, particularly with some of the volatility that's happening with revenues and costs and inflation, et cetera. And we received a successful audit with no findings or recommendations. Thank you. That's fantastic. All right. Let's talk a little bit about 2025 goals and projects. Housing sales so far the first quarter, January, February, and March, are at budget, which is great. We budgeted a certain amount. We anticipated a certain amount of housing sales every month. And the first 3 months, we have actually met that number, which is great. Let's hope that trend continues and we can continue throughout the year. That's the positive. I'm not going to say it's a negative, but our costs for our capital projects, the bids for those are coming in higher than anticipated. So far we're seeing revenue kind of doing this, but it looks a little bit like our inflation and costs may be going up. So we're having to be a bit more strategic and thoughtful with capital projects in 25 and 26. We're actually meeting with our board April 26th to talk a little bit more about that. Revisiting capital projects for 25, what are the priorities, what's the cash flow, what can we do, what should we maybe wait and delay. There's a lot of change and volatility going on with tariffs. No one really knows what's going on, but what we are seeing is contractors are putting kind of an additional margin in their bids because they're not sure what to experience, and they're, of course, passing that on to us. So we'll talk a little bit more about projects next. Number one, I shouldn't say number one. There's no priority here. We want to complete the Ceramics Club kiln room improvements. This has been a long time coming for the Ceramics Club, but they needed to expand their kiln room so that they can actually do more of their craft and their hobby. The Artisan Shop has a small shop across the courtyard here. There's been talk for years and interest in expanding that shop into the vacated billiards room. That's finally happening. That project is actually going to start in April, so we're really excited about that. We want to complete the Metalworking Crafts Club improvements. That's going to be in the building over here. We call it the Shotgun Building. It's basically the north end of the shuffleboard court. That's going to become the Metal Arts facility. We're really excited about that. And beginning the lapidary expansion project. That's expanding the south portion of this facility. Across the courtyard is the lapidary club space. The idea and the concept so far is to push out to the south to give that club more space. We want to complete $2.3 million in maintenance projects. Again, we have 176,000 square feet of facilities. We have to maintain those facilities. So we're anticipating to spend about $2.3 million this year in maintaining those facilities. We want to complete a utilities audit. We want to explore revenue diversification options. What can we do to create more revenue? And really more of a governance type item. We want to develop recommendations to improve board-appointed committees and the member appointment process. What can we do to fine-tune that? Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, but I do want to put a special mention out to our Canadian friends. Regardless of what is happening in Washington, D.C., our Canadian friends are very much a part of the GVR community, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that. Thank you. Thank you all very much. That concludes the presentation. I'm going to ask the membership if there's any questions or comments. If so, you can come up to the mic and provide a comment. And after that, we're going to adjourn. And then at 10:30, the new board is going to take their seats around this table, and they're going to go into a special meeting and elect their officers and discuss next year's calendar. So with that, are there any questions? Come on up to the mic, man.
Hello, my name's Ann. I live at Casa Palomas 1. I bought my house 6 years ago. Prior to that, I lived in Sahuarita. And prior to that, I lived in Green Valley. So I've been back and forth. So I've got a little experience with both sides of the track here. Once I got to this particular neighborhood, I noticed there was a lot of chatter. And I don't prescribe through rumor mill. I figure we got the GVR here, we got everybody. I'm going to ask my questions here, okay? Because asking the neighbors and people on the street and in the store, you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers.
Sure. I'll
Our
do my
neighbor-
best, by the way.
Pardon?
I'll do my best.
Okay. The first issue that I encountered sitting at my HOA meetings is everybody seemed to have a different response as to how we ended up allowing, oh, no, let me backpedal there. No, how we ended up just being a member of the GVR that we could go to anybody's neighborhood. Nobody seemed to have a set standard as to why the pools in the clubhouses were in some neighborhoods and others didn't have them. And then there were basically community
Sure.
pools and clubhouses. So with that said, could you tell me when they decided to first have pools and clubhouses in specific neighborhoods?
Sure. I'll be brief. It was the developers that built those subdivisions that made those decisions. So as the developer was putting in those townhomes or single-family homes, they decided to put in certain amenities. And part of the agreement was, is the HOA going to own or maintain that facility, or is it going to be deeded over to GVR to own and maintain? So since the decision was made to deed it over to GVR to own and maintain, those facilities are opened up to all GVR members.
So, okay, that answers that one. Can you tell me when these pools and clubhouses were actually built?
It
or
all
that being able
varies.
to- It all depends
Yeah.
upon the neighborhood? or
Sure.
the
I mean, they
HOA?
were all built around the same time that the homes in those neighborhoods were. There are some exceptions. Some of our larger centers, like West Center here, isn't a neighborhood one, but usually the satellites were built about the same time as the neighborhood.
Okay. Next question is, why does everybody have access to anybody's neighborhood pool and clubhouse?
Yeah, so I kind of answered that, but because GVR owns that facility and that property was deeded to GVR, maintenance is supported by the GVR membership of that facility. So therefore, all of our members can access those facilities.
Okay, because we have an issue with people coming from outside of our neighborhood that actually have a pool and a clubhouse. And they don't mind coming there and just doing what they can't do at their pool and clubhouse.
Someone like, every
Yeah,
pool
they're
is a
like
little different.
children.
All the neighbors try them out and find the one that they like the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we wish that they would come into our neighborhood and behave.
Well, if they're
And
not
block our
behaving,
roadways
you can
because we
always
only have
call.
one way in and one way out.
Yeah.
So.
Don't block the road. You can always call a COA, and we've got our phone numbers on the walls and gates, et cetera, at all of our facilities. If there's a problem with the code of conduct or a member's misbehaving, you can always do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me see. Oh, the next question is, why can't residents opt out of belonging to the GVR just because they own a house? It just seems a little bit odd that you would be required to belong to a facility that a lot of senior citizens, when they get to a certain point, can't actually enjoy the facilities.
Sure.
Maybe they
It-
can't travel, maybe they can't get out of the house. Maybe they can't even walk down the street to the pool, which I have,
That
witnessed.
happens a lot in HOAs too. The HOA, for example, you still have to pay your HOA dues in many cases. You can't just opt out because you stop using the park or the facilities. The way it was set up here at GVR years ago is once a property becomes deed restricted, it's deed restricted in perpetuity. It's kind of
Okay.
like Hotel California.
That sounds all good, you know?
Well,
But the thing of it is
Yeah.
how come nobody has the option to opt out? And I'm bringing this up because we have got a lot of residents, not just in my neighborhood, throughout Green Valley, that actually need assistance to pay the GVR dues.
Sure. And that's exactly why we offer the member assistance program, which is MAP.
Wouldn't it be easier just to let them opt out if they can't afford it?
I don't know that it would, but at the same time, that's the way it was set up here. So it is in perpetuity. They cannot opt out.
How is it that some homes actually are not part of the GVR?
It all depends on what the master development agreement that was put in place when a subdivision was built. Is it within the GVR boundary, and were the CC&Rs within that HOA? Did they mention anything about, properties being deed restricted? There are some that are voluntarily deed restricted, which means, if you opt in, then you can participate in GVR. But again, like the last question, once you're in, you can't undeed restrict your property. But it really all depends on the property and the developer. These are all private property developments. And so if a developer, when it's developing a property, doesn't want to become part of GVR, then they don't have to. Most of them want to because they can see the benefit of providing this amenity to their residents. It's a selling point.
Okay, speaking about selling points. When people buy in to Green Valley, I wish there was some sort of stipulation that the realtors would give during the sale of that property in the closing papers, a cheat sheet, not a dissertation, not a whole bunch of pamphlets, just a cheat sheet. This is where you go to get your ID card. This is the phone number.
Right.
This is a little mini map of how to get there from your neighborhood. That would go miles with a
Agreed.
lot of people, because I'm telling you, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I have got lost trying to find this place.
Sure. Wow.
Because everybody do it, go down that street. Oh, no, no, don't tell her that. Go over this way. And I'm like riding in circles until finally I just gave up because I figured, well, you know what? I'm not a member, but I just wanted to check it out. But once I moved over here, I made a concerted effort to find it and not ask anybody for directions.
Sure. So we meet with the realtors about twice a year. We meet and present to the Realtors Association. We get their feedback. We provide information to them. We provide those cheat sheets to some degree. We're always trying to improve that process. We can't always get the realtors to say exactly what we want. We like them to, But sometimes some of them don't even participate in those meetings. But we do try to get the information out to those realtors because they are the first line of new buyers that are coming into Green Valley. But the attempt is there. It certainly is. And anything we can do, any suggestions, we're definitely open to it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You've answered all my questions.
Okay.
Thank you very
Well, thank
much.
you. I appreciate that. Thank
Sure.
you so much. Anything else? All right. Oh, here we go. All right. Almost saved by the bell.
My name is Jeff Baumgartner, and I live on Gulfview Lane, or Court, excuse me. And I have a question about your reserves. What percentage balances do you have regarding your reserves?
Mhm.
As far as how would you rate them in respect to their viability?
Sure.
Is it like 50% reserve balances?
I'm going to ask our CFO, but I
70%?
think we're at about 63. 60.3. All right. 60.3%.
Okay,
at
and
this
how
point.
much of the annual fees or the annual dues goes towards
Mm.
those
Remember that
reserves?
one? $85 is what I'm. See, I've got the Fiscal Affairs Committee, the
Good,
board,
good, yeah,
the
good,
treasurer, and the CFO, which is great,
great.
but roughly $80.
So about 20-some percent from our dues
Sure.
goes towards
Yeah.
that activity. Okay. I guess I'd like to hear that number to be a little bit higher. Is there any talk of increasing that amount?
You know, I think that there is definitely talk. We realize our facilities are getting older.
Yeah,
We're already spending we're anticipating spending 2.3 million this year. There's definitely more that needs to be done. So I'm with you 100%. Anything that we can do to put more money into our reserve accounts is, I think, a good thing.
yeah, we, in our own association, we're at about a 70%
Okay,
reserve level.
sure.
So that number, we got a pretty good report card. And with that number, it still isn't what you'd like to be. You'd like to have 100%, of course. But, 60-some percent looks like it could be better.
You know, if our reserve study financial analyst was here, they'd be able to describe it a little bit more. But I would definitely encourage you to participate or at least attend one of those meetings because they will tell you that that isn't generally the best standard to measure the financial viability of your reserve account. A few years ago, we were at 85%, but we actually spent money out of it. So our reserve number went down. But there are other standards that they can describe much better than I can that we are working towards and meeting. But it's not always 100% or 75%. When we were at 85%, they said we were overfunded.
Yeah.
So we don't need 100%. We're actually right in the sweet spot of where we need to be in terms of being funded.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Any others? All right. I'm going to adjourn this meeting while I still can. So it is 10:22. Thank you all for being here. If you want to stay for the next meeting, please do. We're going to elect, the board is going to elect their officers and then review next year's calendar. So thank you again for coming. You have a great day.